Hey all, Toast here from Wyrd Games on Toast, and this week I am back talking about Malifaux 4th edition. More specifically, I am talking about the catfish riding, deep south living, family feud filled wonders that are the Clampetts. Two quick disclaimers: this video will be focusing on the Clampetts FISHERFOK. If you want a video on the Clampetts ballyhoo buckets, or the rest of the angler keyword for that matter, let me know in the comments down below. Disclaimer number 2 is that Wyrd Games sent me a copy of the Clampetts FISHERFOK for review. This isn't actually a review of the box in any way, as this is more intended to be a mechanics-based guide for new players, but transparency is always important, and with that all out of the way, let's get on with the show. If you were to pick up the Clampetts FISHERFOKs, what stuff should you be prepared for? First things first, shenanigans. Simply put, you have a lot of shenanigans in this box. Everything can teleport. Some things can teleport in multiple ways. Some things can teleport your enemies en masse. Other things can move enemies and then teleport to more enemies. Heck, you can even move your stuff and then make them do schemes. The most shenaniganiest thing of all, as I'm sure you all well know. Not only that, these guys have a good old bit of burl to them. That's right, despite being primarily made up of fish-themed pocket princes, the Clampetts are, for the most part, pretty darn durable. Whether you are a massive catfish with 18 trillion ways to not die, a dog who can come back from the dead, or just a basic chaff piece who can reduce damage for the lols, the Clampetts are trickier than you might expect to put down. And thirdly, sneaky damage. These lads and lasses have a lot of damage in their kit, but a lot of that comes from weird places. Whether they burn a bunch of resources to skyrocket their damage, explode for AoE damage, or measure their attacks from unusual sources, the Clampetts can get their damage out, and that damage isn't too shabby when it lands. There's more to the Clampetts than that, but those are the three things that stood out to me when I was playing them. But now it's time to dive into the meat of the crew. As per usual, we are going to start with their crew card, and in this case it's called Brackish Bully. This is so you can get an idea of what everybody can do in addition to their basic stuff on their actual unit card. Brackish Bully comes with 3 powerful boons. The first being fishing holes, which can be used by any angler model in your crew. So in this case, literally every model in the box. This ability allows your models, when they succeed an attack action that deals damage, to remove a tide marker within 1 inch of itself to deal +1 damage. Importantly, this isn't an additional instance of +1 damage, so it won't sneak past things like hard to kill. Oh, and this ability mentioned tide markers. I'll get into tide markers in just a little bit, just hang tight. This ability is just good damage amplification. Tide markers are fairly easy to generate, so burning them to increase your crew's fairly middling damage output is always worth considering. Just be aware that tide markers are used for a few other interactions within this crew, so don't go about burning them all willy-nilly. Moving on to the next effect of Brackish Bully, we get to the tactical action Nautical Nonsense. This can only be used by models with both the angler and the unique keywords on their card. Nautical Nonsense is a signature action, has a range of 6 inches, a skill of 0, and a target number of 6. If successful, you generate a tide marker within range. Right off the bat, this is a cheap and cheery way to get tide markers onto the board, which of course combos nicely with fishing holes, allowing Brackish Bully to work well within itself, let alone the rest of the crew's interactions. It also comes with a soul stone trigger, the Bestest Boy. This lets you summon a Bruce in base contact with the made marker. Bruce is unique, however, so you can't summon a Bruce if you have a Bruce already on the board. However, if Bruce is dead, Bestest Boy away. As we will soon find out, Bruce likes getting stuck into the action, so his untimely death is fairly inevitable, and Nautical Nonsense into Bestest Boy lands the wombo combo of generating a tide marker and putting a model back on the field. finally, Brackish Bully provides all of your unique angler models with this signature Soulstone action Caught a Biggin. This ability has a 6-inch range and no target number, so it just goes off. This ability lets you once again interact with tide markers on the board. You pick a friendly tide marker within range, declare an attack action drawing range and line of sight from that target marker. If the attack succeeds, you then draw a card and also remove the tide marker. Firstly, this gives all of your uniques a signature action that lets them attack again. This alone is pretty solid. Secondly, it gives everyone a hefty range increase. You are functionally adding 6 inches to any of your attacks, and due to line of sight being drawn from the marker as well, you can get around cover and blocking models, which is very sneaky. Since you are still doing an attack action, you can absolutely trigger fishing holes as well, provided you have a tide marker within 1 inch of the model using Caught a Biggin. Theoretically, this could be the same tide marker used for Caught a Biggin, you just have to be within 1 inch of the tide marker that you chose to measure from. The only downside to this is the Soulstone cost. Brackish Bully as a crew card is pretty darn resource intensive in general, with 2 ways to drain your Soulstones, which means you are going to have to be careful with how aggressively you use this. However, being able to make markers, increase your damage and extend your threat range is all good stuff. Flipping Brackish Bully over, we have all the tokens and markers you should expect to see when playing the Clampetts FISHERFOLK, and I think it's important we go over some of them now because some of these are unique to the Clampetts and are worth discussing. Not to dwell on these too much as we have a lot of units to go over, but we are going to start with our tide markers. These do all kinds of things when interacted with using other abilities and actions. However, they innately have severe and concealing. This can be used to slow key lanes and generally block line of sight. It doesn't have an aura, but the markers do take up tangible board space, so you can use that defensively in a pinch. Next, we have Aura Staggered. If active, enemy models within 2 inches of the model with the token must discard a card when it activates, or they gain Staggered. Staggered is a -2 to their speed, which is a solid way of slowing things down, and also combos with the severe of tide markers. Drift is your next token, and this is another one you will see a lot within the Clampetts. If you have a drift token when you activate, you can remove the token and place the model into base contact with any tide marker within 5 inches. Importantly, this does not remove the tide marker. Drift gives your crew a staggering amount of mobility and lets them get into and out of trouble basically at will. Drift is partially why you want to be careful with how many tide markers you burn with other interactions and effects. Next, we have Entranced, which prevents your enemies from cheating when they target your lads, which is always nice. And finally, we have Hastened, which gives your guys +2 speed, basically the opposite of Staggered. It also cancels out Staggered if you were afflicted by it previously, which is handy too. If you made it this far, thank you for supporting the channel and enjoying the content that I produce. If you want to help the channel further, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you want to go one step beyond, then you can also sign up to my Patreon or my YouTube members for as low as £1 a month or one of your local regional currencies, dollary dues, euros, whatever. You will gain access to content early, some behind the scenes stuff, and the occasional ramble for good measure. With that out of the way, back to the show. With tokens and markers out of the way, I think it's time to delve into the units that make up the crew. And of course, we have to start with the biggin, the quadrupedal, gremlin-mounted catfish himself, the Clampetts. Looking at the front of the card, the Clampetts has a solid, if not amazing, set of stats. Defense 6, Speed 6, a slightly underwhelming willpower of 5, and a beefy size 3, making it easier to see things whilst also theoretically being easier to see in return, although we'll get into why that's not the case in just a moment. They also come with the standard 14 health for a master. Raw stats are only half of the story though, as this lad also comes with 3 abilities that make him extra spicy. Firstly, we have Old Reliable, Hard to Kill. Hard to Kill makes it so if you have 2 or more health, you can't be reduced below 1 health from a single source of damage. This can be mitigated with some abilities and certain attacks that deal multiple instances of damage, but in general, this makes the Clampetts trickier to take down than his stats would imply. Not only that, this thing has stealth. He's a size 3 stealth piece, making it even harder to take him down. If you are more than 6 inches away from this model, then enemies can't target you. They also ignore you for the purposes of line of sight, which is more of a negative than anything else, so bear that in mind. You can't easily hide your models behind the Clampetts. You'll have to use terrain like everybody else. Hard to Kill and stealth are a great combo though. It means the Clampetts is much harder to take down since they survive an extra hit in most cases and are pretty difficult to hit with range attacks. If they can shoot you, you can charge them, and if you can charge them, well, they are in trouble. If you are new to the Clampetts or new to Malifaux as a whole, stealth can be quite easy to forget, so try and drill this into your mind that this massive, chunky, Cthulhian monster catfish is actually partially invisible. Finally, you have Thrown Overboard, which once again just adds another layer of bulk to the Clampetts. When you take damage, you may drain a soulstone. If you do, make a tide marker in base contact and heal 2. This is incredible. Sure, it's another soulstone tax in addition to all of the other soulstone taxes you have within this crew, but the fact it generates out of activation tide markers in incredibly relevant locations is amazing in and of itself. This lets you burn those tide markers for fishing holes to increase your damage when you do activate. It lets you summon dead Bruces. It lets you use drift tokens to teleport reinforcements in to help the Clampetts. It lets you use Quarter Biggin to attack on signature or to get a buddy to attack on a signature. The marker generation is top notch, especially when this isn't locked to once per activation. Every time you take damage from any source, you can plonk down a token, which is insane. Not only that, this makes you way harder to kill as you get to heal. Healing is insane when you have Hard to Kill, as every time you are dropped to 1 health, you can heal back to 3, provided you have a soulstone, taking you over the threshold for Hard to Kill, letting you survive another 2 hits, which you can still heal from if you wanted to. It's absolutely bonkers. Now, despite all of this, the Clampetts can die. They are not immortal, but the amount of effort it takes to kill the Clampetts is often not worth it. I have had players simply not bother because they don't want to fuel my tide marker engine and they don't want to deal with an endless resupply of Hard to Kill, so they just ignore him and do other things, which lets you just ram the Clampetts in their face and have a good time. In short, the Clampetts is a tank and practically unkillable if you have soulstones. Be reckless, have a good time, and as you gain experience, you will learn what can kill the Clampetts, what you should avoid, and what things you can safely bulldoze into. So experiment, have a good time with it. Flipping the card over, we have his attacks and his tacticals, and since the Clampetts is a master, they have a fair few of both. Starting with Tongue Lash, we have a melee attack with a whopping 3-inch range, a skill of 6 that targets willpower, and does 2 damage a pop. The range is nice even if the damage is a little bit low at base. It does come with 2 triggers though, the first being a crow called Mental Trauma, and boy howdy is Mental Trauma a potential doozy. Your opponent discards a card. If they don't or they can't, they take a flat 3 damage. Attacking the hand, as we saw in my Jackdaw video, is always nice. So even if they do discard a card, you are getting some pretty saucy value. If you do manage to land the bonus damage, well, that's even better. Since this is a separate instance of damage, things like Hard to Kill can be bypassed in the right situation, as you are doing an instance of 2 damage and then a separate instance of 3 damage. Very, very sneaky. Of course, if you wanted to boost your damage even higher, you can use things like fishing holes and razors to do up to 8 or even 9 damage, which is not too shabby, although it does take some setup and a little bit of luck. Even with just 5 or 6 damage, you can kill smaller minions instantly and deal catastrophic damage to everything else. The second trigger is Whirlpool, and this is yet another Soul Stone trigger. All enemy models within 1 inch of the target, so the thing that you just licked, are placed within 3 inches of this model. This can be incredibly disruptive as the Clampetts is big. The range on the attack is 3 inches as standard. Factoring in base sizes of the target and the 1 inch range of the Whirlpool, the amount of stuff you could potentially teleport is ludicrous, and the amount of space you can move them is equally as ludicrous. This is especially impactful if you are fighting for control over an objective. Now you can launch 1, 2, 3 models wherever you damn please, and there's nothing your opponent can really do about it. You could yeet them into position for the perfect scheme, or remove models who are preventing your scheme so you can go and, well, scheme. The list of benefits of mass model relocation are vast. Keep this as a back pocket play. Just be aware of the cost, as those soul stones have a lot of value in the Clampetts. You have to spend them wisely. Next we have Fishing with Dynamite, which sounds hilarious. It's a magic attack with a range of 8, a skill of 6, it targets defense, and it deals 2 damage a pop. Additionally, it deals 1 damage to enemy models within a 1 inch aura of the initial target, and that aura gets bigger based on how many raises that you manage to secure. Again, the damage isn't great at base on the card, but the AoE damage is always nice. It's another way to potentially get around things like hard to kill, as you could lick someone so they have 1 wound, then throw a bomb at somebody else and have the explosion chip off that last bit of health. Also, being able to throw up to 4 dynamites in a single turn is rather hilarious, as that's a lot of potential AoE that your opponent just kinda has to eat, as only the target of the attack gets a chance to save. Everyone else, well, if that succeeds, they bite that explosion. The attack also has 2 triggers, the first being a ram for critical strike. This deals +1 damage to the target. This doesn't increase the damage of the AoE, but it does make it so the initial target of the attack takes 3 damage, which isn't too bad, and of course you could increase that to 4 if you comboed that with fishing holes. The final trigger is your crow trigger, and this is called Friendly Waters, and this allows you to apply a drift token to the Clampetts. Drift tokens are great for teleporting to tide markers, giving you a way to escape or to get into more trouble later on. Onto tactical actions, we have Fish On, a range of 8, a skill of 0, and a target number of 6, which targets allies. You get to move either the target or the Clampetts towards the other one. Free movement to set up sneaky plays is always nice. Malifaux isn't always about hitting stuff really hard with really big sticks, so the Clampetts having some utility helps round them out nicely. You also get a trigger on a tome for Draw Out Secrets, which lets you make a scheme marker in base contact with the target. Yet more utility if movement was good. Movement and a free scheme marker is even better. Finally, we have their signature action, Siluriid Stomp, 6 inch range, skill 0, and a target number of 6. Simply put, you teleport within range and everybody within 1 inch takes a target number 13 speed duel, or they take 1 damage. If you get a ram trigger, you even place a tide marker to boot. I love anything that forces unnecessary duels on my opponents, as I love draining their decks. So teleporting into a big cluster as a signature and forcing 2, 3, 4 flips on inconsequential damage is just a good time. I am then free to throw bombs or lick people inappropriately. If I get a tide marker out of all of this, I can even support the Clampetts in various ways going forward. This is a great ability and it is loads of fun and gives the biggest lad a shocking amount of mobility. Considering they already had a fair chunk built in thanks to the drift mechanic, enjoy having even more. As an unkillable exploding force of nature, the Clampetts is just a complete package. They can get into trouble effortlessly, they can get out of it just as easily, they can disrupt mass amounts of enemy models, scheme run when needed, they can assist scheme runners to boot, they deal good single target damage, they deal good AoE damage, they target the hand, they target the deck. This thing is just a menace on so many levels. Throw it down their throats and force them to deal with the nonsense. Onto our totem, and we have Bruce, the bestest and the fishiest of all the boys. Bruce has a defense of 5, a willpower of 4, his speed of 6, and size 1 with 6 wounds. So, in short, Bruce is pretty darn squishy, but decently nimble and easy to hide because of speed 6 and the itty bitty size 1. Bruce also comes with 2 abilities. Accomplice, which lets you discard a card to chain activate another model, and Latch On, which gives enemies in base contact with Bruce a -1 to their defense value. Both of these abilities are very strong, with Accomplice breaking up the turn structure and Latch On letting you get more hits through. An example of using both of these in a single turn would be using Bruce to move into contact with an enemy, whether by tide or by movement, activating Aunty Mel or the Clampetts, and taking full advantage of that -1 defense debuff. On the flip side, we have one attack action called Trapping Jaws, which has a 1-inch range, a skill of 5, and a built-in positive flip, and it targets defense and does 2 damage. Considering Bruce is likely debuffing defense and getting a free positive flip on this attack, it is shockingly reliable for dealing a little bit of damage in a pinch. Not only that, if the attack is successful, the enemy is also staggered, which reduces their speed by 2, making it harder for them to get away from the incoming danger sprung on from Accomplice. It also combos really well with the Clampetts' Silhouette Stomp, as that targets speed specifically. This attack also has a crow trigger called You're Coming With Me, which lets you move the target 3 inches and then teleport Bruce within base contact with it. Like with Whirlpool on the Clampetts, displacement is always powerful, so Bruce being able to do it on a smaller scale is just great. Outside of biting people's ankles, Bruce has 2 tactical actions, first of which is his signature, Family Pet. Range 6, skill 0, and target number 7, making this a little bit difficult to pull off. Once per activation, however, you can target an ally and place Bruce in base contact with them. Then that target heals 3 and gains a drift token. A gentle reminder that healing the Clampetts or Aunty Mel is very strong, as they both have hard to kill. Spoiler on Aunty Mel. This is straight up great. Healing is always nice. Healing and getting a free placement with Bruce is even better. Dropping drift to allow the target to place later in the game just keeps adding to the wonder, and it's a free action, so you can just throw this out and have a good time. You can't spam it due to the once per activation restriction, but other than that, this tactical action is super solid. It even has a ram trigger for gone fishing, which lets you place a tide marker, further supporting your game plan and your board manipulation. This is top-notch stuff. Finally, Bruce has a Soul Stone action called Resupply. Once per turn, you can draw 2 cards from your discard pile with values of 1 to 5. This is great and lets you enhance your duels, get the right suits into your hand, etc, etc. It also lets you protect your hand from being targeted by certain crews, giving you a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to discarding. Again, super solid. Overall, Bruce is great, and he certainly earns the title of bestest boy. He will die pretty darn often because his stats aren't all that high, and he really wants to get stuck into the melee. However, when he's alive, he's definitely doing the Lord's work. Teleporting, activation, manipulation, healing, token and marker generation, displacement, debuffing, and surprisingly good damage. Bruce is just a great package from every angle, and don't forget, if he does die, you can just summon him with a Soulstone thanks to the Brackish Bully crew card. So far so good, but things only get better when we start talking about Aunty Mel. Aunty Mel rolls up with defense 6, willpower 6 and a speed of 5, and despite being a fairly large model on the tabletop, she's only size 1. Throw in 11 health and a cheap and cheery cost of 8 and you've got some good stats for a reasonable price. Aunty Mel has 2 abilities. The first I won't go over again in too much detail as it's hard to kill, and hard to kill is always great, and with Bruce's healing, Aunty Mel is actually quite difficult to take down if you keep her supported. She also comes with There She Blows, which after deployment lets you attach a white whale upgrade to a non-leader model that costs 7 or less. It's time to put Aunty Mel aside for just a second as we now need to go over the white whale just so you know what that does. The white whale grants 2 abilities to the target who has been granted the gift of its presence. Firstly, From Hell's Heart I Poke Ya, which simply put grants a +1 damage buff to Aunty Mel when she stabs you. Aunty Mel is no slouch in combat, as we will soon find out, so more damage is always great. Fishing holes can of course be used to gain another +1 damage, which is equally as eye-watering. Secondly, a gold doubloon fire basically means when anyone attacks a white whale target, you can opt to not deal additional damage or any other raise effects when you do a raise, and instead draw a single card from your deck. It's situational, but it's always nice to have. Card draw is always useful, and there will be cases where you want that extra card, especially if they are dying without the bonus raise damage. In short, White Whale results in more damage for Mel and more cards for everyone else, and that's just excellent. Back to Mel, and we go to her flip side, and we start with her only attack action, which is All Thunder. And All Thunder is one heck of a doozy. It has 2 ranges, either a 1-inch melee range or a 10-inch ranged attack. It has skill 6, it targets defense, and it deals 3 flat damage. Right off the bat, that's a hefty chunk of damage that can go all the way to 5 without any raises thanks to White Whale and Fishing Holes. Quarter Biggin also gives that range 10 a staggering boost in board coverage in a pinch. Quarter Biggin also gives a massive range boost to the melee version of this attack, and not only that, the melee version also gains positive flips, which is fantastic, meaning you can just reach out and All Thunder from anywhere with anything and just have a really good time doing so. Then you factor in her 3 triggers, the first of which is a ram for critical strike to gain another +1 damage. That's right, you could be hitting as much as 6 damage before raises with Aunty Mel. Then you have Gut Feeling on a Tome, which lets you pick a suit once per activation. If your opponent doesn't, or they can't discard the suit you picked, you declare All Thunder again for free. That's just a big oof for your opponent right there. Finally, we have What Do You Say About My Pappy, which only affects non-leaders. This lets you attach the White Whale upgrade to your target, provided there are no White Whale afflicted enemies alive when you use this trigger. This is especially good because it also bypasses half of the restrictions imposed by There She Blows. Sure, you still can't put it onto leaders, but you can put it onto an enemy of any points value, which is very sneaky. All in All Thunder is great. Straight up, you want to be hitting things with this on the regular. Combo this with Bruce to reduce defense and you are good to go. Her damage can go to disgusting levels. The average defense value in Malifaux is like 5, so you can tank that all the way down to 4 with Bruce. On the best day imaginable, you can land a meaty dual total of 20 to their 4. You now do 6 damage with raises included. This goes to 7 damage with White Whale, and then 8 damage with Critical Strike, and then 9 damage if you factor in Fishing Holes. In short, when you are in magical Christmas land, Mel can hurt quite a bit. But that's not all, because Mel also comes with 2 tactical actions. Her first is her signature, Inclement Weather. Range 10, skill 0, and a target number of 6. You make a tide marker in range. Tide markers are great. Actionless tide markers are even better. This comes with 2 triggers, Typhoon, which is a soulstone trigger, surprise surprise. Once per activation, move enemies within a 2-inch aura of the generated tide marker 2 inches directly away from said tide marker. As always, this placement is really strong, and this is the third way we can do that within this crew, and the second way we can do this en masse. Troll the Surface is the Totem trigger, and it lets you look at the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck and then put them back in any order you want. This is great. You pop this before you attack to set up the best possible outcome during your next couple of All Thunders, or you set up for their next activation to tank all of their flips and force them to fail their target numbers and potentially drag out some cheeky cheats. It's a super versatile trigger. Finally, you have Life Raft as your final action. Aura 3, skill 0 with a target number of 6. This is another signature, and it's pretty stonking good at the start of the game. Mel and all allies in range gain a drift token. This is outstanding. Drift lets you teleport to tide markers, and of course Mel can also make those tide markers with inclement weather. Pass drift to as many people as possible, burn those drifts on activation to zip up the board for free. It's just great stuff. Since Mel also gains a drift token from this, she can teleport later in the game for her own shenanigans to boot. Overall, like everything so far, Aunty Mel is wonderful. She's hard to kill, she's not too expensive, she hits like a ton of bricks, and she has plenty of support and utility in her kit to make her a pillar of your crew. Aunty Mel is just top-notch stuff. Finally, we get to the Skulkerskins, the de facto minions for this box, and we get 3 of them. For 5 points, you get Defense 5, Willpower 5, Speed 5, 7 health, and a size of 1. So nice and short like everybody else in this crew, bar the Clampetts themselves. These are fine, quite durable at 7 health. They're a little bit slow at Speed 5, but drift exists, so speed is ultimately not an issue. And abilities, as has been the case on many occasions, make them much harder to kill, turning their middling defenses into more of a valid wall of perpetual annoyance. Firstly, we have Shrouded in the Shallows. You take damage, and in response you can burn a drift token to reduce that damage by 2. This can be a lifesaver in a pinch, even if you lose some of your mobility, since you don't have a drift token to teleport to a tide marker if you burn it to reduce damage. Still, this is super useful when you need to not be dead. Like with the Clampetts, Skulkerskins also get stealth. Like before, this means you can't be targeted if you are more than 6 inches away. So Skulkerskins are more than capable of dodging bullets, as you are nothing more than a whisper on the wind. What more could you really want from cheap and cheery chaff? Well, attacks for 1, and that's what we are looking at now. We have 2, starting with Shove. Range 1, skill 5, and a built-in crow. It targets defense and it deals no damage. At base, you get to move enemies 2 inches, and for every raise, you get to move them an additional inch. Displacement might be everywhere already, but seeing it here is no less wonderful. Push people off objectives, push them into range of your stuff, push them out of range of their auras. The uses for a push are oceanic in scale, so experiment and use your noggin. Don't forget, it also has a built-in trigger with Friendly Waters, which gives you a drift token. This is great as it lets you teleport into trouble with a token, push someone to get your token back, and maybe use that token later on to proc Shrouded in the Shallows to reduce incoming damage. Your next attack is Blood Dart, a range 10 ranged attack with skill 5 that targets defense and deals 2 damage. If you are targeting something within 1 inch of a tide marker, which I'm sure you've noticed is very doable by now, this attack even gets a positive flip, making it nice and reliable. Not only that, it has 2 triggers, the first of which is Sinkhole on a ram, which funnily enough makes a tide marker in base contact with the target, making your next shot more reliable if there wasn't already a token there. You also get friendly waters on a crow for a drift token, which is always nice to have. Onto tacticals, you have Under the Surface as your signature, range 6, skill 0 and a target number of 7, and 7's always a little bit unreliable. You get to target a friendly scheme marker or a friendly tide marker within range and then place in base contact with it. Then you get to make either a scheme or a tide marker and remove the one that you just teleported to. Converting schemes into tides or tides into schemes is just solid tactical meat to chew on when you are planning your turns. Another way of teleporting around the board as well is just great. Theoretically, you can burn a drift token to teleport when you first activate, then pop Under the Surface to teleport again, and then scheme, and then move, and then scheme again. In that one activation, you've potentially teleported 12 inches and moved an additional 5 and schemed twice, which is wacky if you have the planning down for it. And of course, you also get friendly waters to get a drift token, which is great since it replenishes the token you likely used to teleport earlier on activation. This lets you teleport some more next activation to do even more shenanigans, or just tank some extra damage with Shrouded in the Shallows. Overall, Skulkerskins are pretty darn great. Their range attack is potentially reliable chip damage at a good range, and with all of the movement tricks in this crew, and specifically on the Skulkerskins as well, they can get around the board and just do what they want to do, making them great for doing schemes and great for doing strategies. And of course, with the Clampetts, you can make them scheme and move even more. There's just so much to Skulkerskins and to the Clampetts when it comes to the actual scheme running game right out of the box, despite everything else being fairly darn killy. But in conclusion, the Clampetts, they're great, right? They have decent avenues for damage, they have loads of tricks up their fishy sleeves, and they are all deceptively hard to kill and just pack all kinds of utility, which I love. That being said, I think deciphering the best route to victory for the Clampetts is actually quite difficult, especially if you're a new player, because you have so much scope to be where you want to be and do what you want to do, but it requires a lot of setup, a lot of preparation to fulfill those plans, to fulfill that route to victory, and that could be a little bit overwhelming. But as an aside, I am quite an aggressive player when it comes to Malifaux, so when I was first learning the Clampetts, I fell into the trap of running forward, hitting things with sticks, and this didn't go too badly. As a new player to the Clampetts, I was able to brute force some victories and not necessarily use all of their tricks. I learned their tricks over time, slowly, as I played more games. So if you want to just go in there and bap things and kill them, you can absolutely do that, because the Clampetts are quite good at that thanks to all of their killy tricks, in addition to their mobility and their schemy tricks. Just be aware that Malifaux is vast and varied, and some crews are very, very good at killing you, so even with your durability, you might find that against some matchups, you can't play that aggressively and you will just die, but that's all part of the learning experience. All that being said though, the Clampetts are a bunch of fun to play. I had so much fun just interacting with all the things they could do, and these guys, you know, interact with every facet of Malifaux almost, not to mention their models are absolutely gorgeous. Just all of them are beautiful. So I am just a massive fan of this box from every conceivable level. But that's the end of this video. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of the Clampetts. Do you play them? Do you want to play them? And did this video help you learn about the Clampetts and maybe improve your game? This is a new series, so any feedback would be greatly appreciated. And if you want to see more videos like this, let me know in the comments down below. And whilst you're down there, be sure to hit like and subscribe, as that helps the channel out a lot. And until next time, lads, ladies, and everybody in between and beyond, ta-ra. Hey all, Toast here, and welcome to the post-Toast credits. A massive shout out to all of my patrons and members, but an extra special shout out to all my algorithmic demon slayers: ABUNDCD, Andy Morris, blah blah blah, Brioche, Head Knight of Paint, Heinz D, Lord Phylax, Maps, Paulo Fernando Concleves Perez for Hero, Sable Saber, Steve Bean, Houston Toad, and Velas. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, and I'll catch you all next time.